So before you tonight, we have an ordinance that the Planning and Zoning Commission has been working on for the last couple months. The ordinance started with a letter that was submitted from Miss Brenda Von Wondruska regarding the ability to, she owns the Silos development on Steiner Avenue, the ability to go through a minor amendment process in order to change some of the space within the development. So this is one of the traditional mixed-use developments in town. We have very few. This is a view, I guess, looking to the south, Steiner Avenue. This is the Silos development. Really consists of about 12 multifamily apartment units. Also contains some office space as well as some retail space. And like I said, this is a mixed-use development and one of the very few that we have that have gone through the PUD process. This is kind of a typical PUD that we see in town, and it's has to do with residential subdivisions, and this is Tiempo Commons here in the center of your screen. They've gone through the PUD process in order to achieve private streets with smaller lot sizes and smaller lot widths than you'd normally see. You can see the subdivision to the north, which is primarily an R1 designation, which has a lot larger city streets and lot sizes. And so these are kind of the two distinct cases of PUDs that we have in town, the one single lot mixed use example, and then this example of the residential subdivisions that go through the PUD process. There's currently in the code we have options for minor PUD amendments and major PUD amendments. So for minor PUD amendments, if it does not meet these 11 criteria, then you're able to go through the minor amendment process in order to make deviations and approved plans of PUDs. And right now, with the minor amendment process, really just goes to the body exercising jurisdiction. So in the case of a type 1 PUD, which is just a single lot and final approvals through Planning and Zoning Commission, it would just go before the commission on a regular agenda item. If it was associated with a subdivision plat, which is a type 2 PUD, then it ends up being final approval via city council, and so it would go as a regular agenda item at a city council meeting. And so if they meet those criteria, or if it does not meet the criteria, then they're able to go through that one unpublic hearing through the decision-making body. And then we go through the criteria that you must not meet in order to be deemed a minor amendment. A lot of it has to do with percentage of increase, and so, for instance, dwelling unit count of the approved PUD. You have a number of dwelling units of different housing types, can't exceed percentage there, floor area increases. All these would necessitate a major amendment. And so after we get through all the minor amendment criteria, we have a process to go through the major amendment. And it's really simple. You really just start from the beginning of the PUD process. And so in order to do a major amendment, looking at the PUD process, you would be going through first a neighborhood meeting, which would require a 15-day notice. Then you'd go through a public hearing before Planning and Zoning Commission, which would require a 30-day notice. And then if it's associated with a type 2 PUD, if it's associated with a subdivision plat, then you'd go preliminary PUD public hearing before the City Council. And then you go through the final PUD review by Planning and Zoning Commission, and then final review by the council if it's associated with that subdivision plat. So really you're looking at a 3-4 month process in order to just go through a major amendment of a PUD. And you'd be going back through the neighborhood meeting. The neighborhood meeting is really just to introduce the PUD concept to the public and the surrounding neighbors and the area. So we had, taken a look at Brenda's request, and as with a lot of the code amendments that we do, we had taken a look at some jurisdictions around the state as well as out of state. We looked at Post Falls, Ketchum, Haley, Sun Valley, Idaho Falls, and Kootenai County here in Idaho. Then looked over in Colorado at Mountain Village, Big Bear Lake, California, and Woodstock, Illinois, for what they do with their minor and major amendment process. And so there's some common themes that we had seen. First was typically with the minor amendments, there's administrative approval allowed with that. And so staff's able to look at the proposal and just administratively approve some of those minor deviations. Another common theme is that there's one public hearing for major amendments. Instead of starting from the beginning of the process like we do, they would just go one public hearing before the decision-making body for the original PUD. So the Commission did explore Ms. von Wondruska's proposal. Really the issue that you have is that when you're trying to craft some language just for that one scenario, you end up adversely affecting maybe some of the other PUDs. So take, for example, the first image of the silos and well, just converting, maybe there's an office space on the bottom floor, the rest of the mixed-use development is a combination of maybe some offices and multifamily residential. It's in an R4 zone, so there's apartment buildings across the street and right next door. Well, it may make a lot of sense if you can just have some flexibility, as long as it's the underlying zone, as long as it's allowed use in the underlying zone, to be able to put one of those uses and interchange those uses in the development. But if you were to take, for instance, like the Tiempo Commons example, and you were to say that, well, if any of the underlying uses of that zone, which is also zoned R4, were allowed to just go into existing buildings, then you could end up with triplexes, the single-family dwellings that are converted to triplexes, and it may just, harm the underlying character of the theme of the plan unit development. And so, trying to craft the criteria around Ms. von Wondruska's proposal really just ended up adversely affecting some of the other PUDs when we went through that thought process. And so, we did review the criteria, did review the process, and based upon that research that we conducted and just our own review of the current code language, what we had proposed to do was shift the minor amendments to administrative approval like the other jurisdictions do, simplify the criteria to what constitutes a major amendment. So we had some redundancies there. There was some, basically 1 through 5 are pretty similar. Their wordings are a little bit different. So we were able to consolidate the 11 criteria that we currently have down to 7. So it simplified the criteria a little bit. And we are proposing to amend the major amendment process to just require one public hearing before Planning and Zoning Commission if it's a Type 2 PUD, and then one hearing before Planning and Zoning Commission, and then a hearing before Council if it's a Type 2 PUD, which is associated with a subdivision plat. And so what that would look like, I didn't do this in legislative format just because it looks like there's a lot of changes, and so this would be the clean copy of the code here. So what we would be doing is going in the minor PUD amendments at the very beginning, inserting the ability to be approved administratively by the zoning administrator. A lot of the middle language here we had kept as far as what needs to be submitted as part of the proposal. And then at the end, we had inserted a sentence that states that if the zoning administrator determines that the change may have a significant impact on the approved project, the administrator may decline to administratively approve such change and shall process the request as a major PUD amendment. So we wanted to reserve the right in order to, maybe there was something that we didn't think of that, certainly didn't meet any of the criteria, but we felt that it was going to kick it into that, it's going to be a big impact to the rest of the PUD. So the people that have already built properties or own properties within the PUD, it could adversely affect them. And so we wanted us to reserve that right in order to make that determination if it could affect the PUD adversely, to go through the major amendment process.
Mike, I just want to remind her, who's the administrator for making that decision?
Be the zoning administrator, so it'd be a representative of our department.
Is that always the same person?
Ultimately be the community development director.
Oh, okay.
And then the PUD amendment procedure, so like I mentioned before, changing that to include one public hearing for a Type 1 PUD before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then 2 public hearings for the Type 2 PUD. if in the case of a Type 2 PUD application, and then we've gone through the criteria. So it used to be a little odd wording where you'd have the criteria under the major amendment, and it'd say that as long as it doesn't meet these criteria. So it seems a little backwards, and so what we've done is taken that out of the minor amendment section and put it in the major amendment section, just to be clear that if you meet any of this criteria, then you're going to end up having to go through the major amendment. And so a lot of these are similar to what we have before, with the 5% increased floor area, ratio and number of dwelling units, residential density. A lot of these haven't changed. We've just combined these and simplified these a little bit, substantially alter the phasing or timing of development, reduce or eliminate factors used to justify any density bonuses or code standard waivers granted. So that's the proposed ordinance before you. The Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct a public hearing on September 14th, and they recommended approval to the council, and staff tonight recommends the council conduct a public hearing, and upon consideration of any testimony presented, approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary. And I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Mike before Art?
Yeah, is the appeal process for either the developer who wants to alter the PUD or the impacted residents or other parties, same as always up through city council?
Correct.
Catherine?
My question, and unfortunately, I don't remember how to pronounce her last name, but Ms. Brenda, did someone communicate with her this information? I didn't remember that part when she made the request.
Yeah, she came to a couple meetings of Planning and Zoning Commission. I did communicate to her after the fact when the commission had decided to move forward these proposed amendments, and while she didn't get the result she was looking for as far as the being classified as a minor amendment and just being able to mix match, as long as the building's already constructed and it's an underlying use for the underlying zoning district, to be able to just insert those uses, however she deems fit. Although we didn't get it into a minor amendment category, it would still be a major amendment for her, but the process would be much simpler. She would just be going through one public hearing before Planning and Zoning Commission, which right now, if you went through a minor amendment, you would be going to the Planning and Zoning Commission for one meeting, although it wouldn't be a public hearing. So the only difference would be that, instead of having to go 3-4 months and do a major amendment that we have right now, she would just be going and doing the one public hearing. So it could be accomplished in 3-4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Other questions for Michael before I open up the public hearing? Okay, thank you, Michael. I will open the public hearing. It's 7:44. And for those that in favor would like to come up, please state your name and address. Let us know what you're thinking. Seeing nobody rush the podium for that, I will ask for any general testimony or opposition to this public hearing. Please come up. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and turn it over to council. This was heard before the admin committee, Jim,
That's
on
correct.
September 26th.
Yeah, I think that Mike and his crew have done a great job of simplifying this and making it easier for people to make changes in a more expedient fashion. And if there's no further discussion, I would move that we approve this ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary.
Second?
Okay. We have a motion by, hang on a second, we have a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine on this. Further debate? Art had his hand up
Not
for
really
something.
debate, but I appreciate the fact that the language is also cleared up so that it reads more directly instead of an inverse, and that really should help clarify some of the matters. So I appreciate the planning and zoning and the department for taking care of that part as well.
Other comments before I call for the roll? Okay, what we've got here is a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to approve this ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings that it be read by title and published by summary. I'll start the roll with Catherine.
Aye.
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 Okay, and we will move on. I will read the ordinance, which is 2016-14. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 4, Chapter 7, amending the minor and major amendment procedures for planning unit developments, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.